was a Saturday night. We had just finished dinner, and my wife gets a phone call. It's her sister who has an important announcement. She's pregnant. And you might think, well, congratulations, that is wonderful news. And usually, you'd be correct. But for us, that night, it was one of the worst moments of our life. Because at that point, we ourselves had been trying to get pregnant for over 4 years. And we were still processing a recent unsuccessful attempt. And so this phone call to us was not wonderful news. It mainly increased our grief. Because you see, infertility, it changes you. You become a wretch, a jealous monster, filled with envy. And you start having bad thoughts. Why them and not us? They've only been together for 2 years, we for 10. Surely we deserve it more. I am the oldest of my siblings. I should have had the first grandchild. Our kid would be much prettier than theirs. And these are not good things to think, not good things to feel, and yet you think and feel them all the same. And slowly being confronted with other people's happiness becomes painful. And this is not always easy for outsiders to understand. And I know this because I used to be one. Back then it was friends of ours who were in a very similar situation. And the husband told me that his wife was having a hard time because her sister had also gotten pregnant first. And I remember thinking, well, what a drama queen. Can't she just get over herself, be happy for her sister? She'll get pregnant herself eventually, right? Now, I don't think I really said that out loud, because I'm pretty sure the husband would have kicked my ass. And he would have been right to do so, because now I know that this is not an active type of jealousy. You don't really begrudge the other couple for getting pregnant. It's that you can't help it. There is this deep sadness inside that you can't control. The only thing you can do is try to prevent it. Try not to get in these situations. For example, I have a rather large family, and in the 6 years we struggled with infertility, we must have been invited to about 8 baby showers, of which we attended 0. And that's not just the envy of seeing the new parents with their baby, it's also because of the dread of Aunt Greta. Aunt Greta, who you see twice a year, who will be on her 5th glass of champagne of the night, and who will inevitably ask, so, when are you going to start making grandchildren for your mom and dad? And I swear it's at this point that it feels like infertility does not exist. Like nobody's ever heard about it or would consider it inappropriate to ask this kind of question. And this is weird because a popular estimate is that 1 in 6 couples struggles with infertility. 1 in 6, a terrifying number. And yet this topic is still a bit of a taboo. It's not often discussed publicly, rarely with family and friends, and also not at work. I experienced that myself when one day we were exiting the fertility clinic, and I was very surprised to see one of my close colleagues there, because I had no idea that he was struggling with the same issues. And I remember thinking, well, why don't I know about this? Why didn't he tell me? And then it struck me. This colleague was probably equally surprised to see me there, because I also had shared nothing of this at work. And I think there are many reasons that we don't talk about this. Again, sometimes it's just too painful. For me personally, I often felt like it wouldn't be very helpful, especially talking to people who hadn't had the same experiences. They often would try to give some well-intended advice, but much of that eventually turned out to be useless. And so I rarely tried. My wife had a slightly different experience. She went looking for stories online. And one of her favorite podcasts that she found was called The Big Fat Negative. And the hosts, they were trying to get pregnant themselves, and they would invite other couples, and medical professionals to talk about it. And this seemed to help my wife a lot. But for me, it scared the crap out of me, because most of those couples would be much further in their fertility journey than us. And some of them had seen some terrible things. And I couldn't handle that. I didn't want to imagine us having to go through those things as well in the future. I was a coward. I didn't want to face this head on. It was easier to not talk or even think about it. Now, over time, of course, my position to this has changed. I now talk about this a bit more openly, obviously. And I've been pleasantly surprised by the amount of people that have come up to me to talk about this. Yet still, it's not always easy. Our final successful IVF attempt happened during the second year of COVID. And so a lot of people think, well, you must have been having some fun during the lockdown, huh? And sometimes I just say, yes, that's right. We were having sex 3 times a day for 2 months. COVID was great. Just because it's easier than telling the whole story. Now, to be honest, we were having a lot of sex. At least the first year. And we were having some fun. At least the first couple of months. After that, planning intercourse and tracking ovulation days is slightly less sexy. And yes, yet you have to do this for about a year. That's a common definition of infertility, being unable to conceive after having 12 months of unprotected sex. And most of the stories you will find about the medical journey afterwards are from the female perspective. So I thought today I might give you the rare male viewpoint. Now for me this is quite easy, because for me personally, the only thing that I had to contribute physically was to produce the seed. And the first time that I went to the hospital for an extraction, they brought me to the small room. And there was already another guy waiting in front of the room in a chair. And I look at him and he looks at me, and it was very awkward. Because we both knew exactly what we would be doing in that room soon. And we also knew what the third guy was doing in there right now. Now, when I finally got into the room, this is what I saw. A pretty basic hospital room. I'm not quite sure what they think I would be using the bed for, but okay. Now, in most movies, they show some kind of pornography here to help you get going. That was not the case here. The only thing that I got was this picture hung above the bed. A photo of a fully clothed woman. And now you think, well, that's kind of useless. But I haven't told you a very important detail yet. You see, in order to ensure a sufficient quality and quantity, the man is asked not to caress the cucumber for about 3 to ideally 5 days before the milking. And now, ladies, you might not know this, but after 5 days of abstinence, most men could make do with a picture of a guy with long hair. Okay? So it took me about 5 minutes. Okay, 2 minutes. Okay, 30 seconds. And then there was this hatch in the wall where you had to open the door, put the cup inside, close the door, and it would magically disappear. Sounds pretty easy, right? I didn't have to do all that much. And still, this one simple thing, it caused me a lot of stress. Because I kept thinking, what if, for some reason, I am unable to produce? What if I produce too little? What if I miss the cup? It sounds stupid, but this actually worried me. Because you literally only get one shot at this. You can't just retry a couple of minutes later. The worst case, you have to wait a full month for the next attempt. And this simple thing gave me a lot of stress. But I just had to do this one thing. While my wife, she had to do a lot more. She had to take pills had to deal with hormone injections, had to go to dozens upon dozens of appointments. She had to get her eggs harvested. So many more things could go wrong. And so whatever stress or pressure I felt for my simple thing, she must have felt 100 times over, both mentally and physically. And I will forever be in awe of the strength of women going through fertility treatments. And imagine having to do that for 6 whole years. Because as I said, we started on our own for about a year. Then we went to the doctor and she said, well, you're probably going to need some complex surgery. So complex, in fact, that it will take over a year for it to get scheduled. And after she recovered, they wanted us to try again in the natural way. That was about 6 months wasted. Didn't work. Then they tried insemination, where they inject the sperm directly into the uterus. Again, a few months, also no success. This is when you graduate to IVF. This is where the woman gets very aggressive hormones to cause their ovaries to overproduce. Instead of 1 egg a month, you get up to 20 or even more. These are then harvested, fertilized in the lab. They wait 3 to 5 days to see which will grow into viable embryos, and then 1 or more of them are placed back and try and get pregnant. We tried about 2 cycles of that. No success. This is when we started looking for a second opinion. We changed hospitals, got a new doctor. The new doctor said, well, you'll probably need another surgery. And guess what? That's going to take another 6 months to happen. And that wasn't even the worst part, because this is when COVID hit. And as you all know, most medical professionals were needed to help with that. And so a lot of fertility treatments were simply paused for 6 months or more. And it's at this point that you start to think, well, where is this going? How long are we going to keep doing this? When are we going to say, maybe it was not meant to be? Because you see, the waiting is not the worst part. It's the insecurity, the not knowing. If they would tell you up front, well, it's going to take 10 years, it's not going to be fun, but at the end you will definitely get pregnant, that would be bearable. But that's not how it works. And so here I was reminded of that podcast I told you about earlier. There was a couple on there from the UK who every few months would travel to Greece to get their fertility treatments. Because here in Belgium, these treatments are relatively cheap. But in a lot of countries, that's not the case. Many couples pay tens of thousands of dollars just to keep trying. And some of them travel to countries like Greece because there it is cheaper to get help. And so this is what I was thinking, in 5 more years, will that be us? Will we be the couple traveling to Greece, trying to keep the hope alive? When will we say it's been enough? Luckily, we never actually had to make that decision, because we got the second surgery, and an IVF attempt soon after that was successful. And about 1.5 years ago, we became the proud parents of a beautiful baby boy. Thank you. But so I feel a bit of a hypocrite standing here before you today, because for us, it eventually worked out. But there are a lot of couples that will remain childless. And I can't even imagine what some people in the LGBTQIA+ community have to go through. Still, I wanted to give you a little bit of advice from personal experience today. First, for the outsiders, I would say, have a bit of empathy. This is a major issue affecting society today. You probably all know someone who is struggling with fertility. And if they don't come to your baby shower, that's not because they don't like you. And if you ever have to tell a childless couple that you're pregnant, maybe send them a text message first, just as a heads up. And secondly, to the people facing infertility, the only thing I can say is, yes, it's worth it. It was worth the 6 years. It's probably worth the thousands of dollars, even going to Greece. Because being a parent is simply phenomenal. About a year ago, it was the middle of the night, and I had to get up to change his diaper. And the moment I removed the dirty diaper, he unleashes a second barrage of the foulest smelling stuff you can possibly imagine. And it was everywhere. It was on my hands, it was on my clothes, it was on my face. And despite all that, I can honestly say that this and every other moment with him have been some of the best of my life. Thank you.